On May 11, 2019, the Columbus Police Department received a frantic 911 call about a potential domestic fight. When first responders came,
anything since then.
So nobody's here has been injured?
No, that's what I told him when I called. He told me that he was over.
They discovered paramedic Kelly Levinsohn dead in her own house. If you're intrigued by this case and want to learn more about Kelly's murderer, we've got you covered. When first responders arrived to the house in Columbus, Georgia, they were surprised to find the door closed. The mystery caller approached officers outside the house and stated that a woman inside needed medical assistance after being involved in a domestic violence incident. Kelly Levinson was discovered dead on the floor of her home when authorities broke through the door. She was covered in blood and had been shot in the head. Despite the lack of evidence of forced entry, investigators uncovered a handgun that seemed to be the murder weapon. Furthermore, while an autopsy revealed that the paramedic died as a result of a single gunshot wound, authorities determined that the paramedic's car had also vanished from the scene. So who killed Kelly Levinson? Despite the fact that the murder weapon was not issued to the police and did not belong to them, officials began examining possible connections and developing a suspect list. After speaking with several of Kelly's neighbors, they learned that the victim was having an affair with police officer William "Bill" Talley. According to neighbors, the couple was not always on good terms and frequently engaged in loud verbal altercations. Furthermore, around a year before the murder, police went to Kelly's residence on a complaint and had to handcuff Talley to calm him down. Surprisingly, the police did not have to wait long to catch the murderer, since the Columbus Department received notice of a catastrophic automobile collision on the highway in Harris County, just hours after the murder. William Talley was recognized as the driver in the collision, and further investigation found that he was driving Kelly Levinson's vehicle, which had gone missing from the victim's home. Talley's possession of the victim's automobile bolstered the case against him. As a result, authorities caught William Talley, who immediately confessed to Kelly's murder after being confronted with incriminating witness statements and a probable connection to the crime. What happened to William Talley? In court, William Talley was charged with violating his oath as a police officer and intentional murder. He pled guilty to criminal homicide in 2020 and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years. He was also convicted of a firearms offense, which meant he'd have to serve 5 years on probation after his release. As a result, despite being eligible for parole, William Talley remains imprisoned at the Long State Prison in Ludowici, Georgia. Matthew Boynton, a guy who fooled the law and orchestrated a shooting that never happened, is the subject of this dark and twisted story. A weird and crooked case that had the cops chasing shadows and falsehoods, a sharp contrast to Griffin, Georgia on April 15, 2016. Jessica Boynton was discovered in her home's closet with a gunshot wound to the head and a police-equipped handgun in her hand. She was pronounced dead at the scene by the county sheriff. There is one major problem, though. Jessica was neither dead nor shot in the head. That's right. Police find and verify Jessica is alive at the scene, and she is rushed to the ER. That is when it's found that there was no exit wound, no bullet, and no entrance wound. That's right. Jessica wasn't shot in the head, but rather stricken in the head with what appears to be blunt force. Also, there were no signs of gunshot residue on Jessica's hands. The police were notified of said shooting by Jessica's then-husband Matthew Boynton. Matthew claims he received a text from Jessica stating she was going to commit suicide. Matthew, a then-police officer, raced home only to hear 2 consecutive gunshots. He raced out of his house fearing for his life and called it backup. The phone records were never verified, and thus the text messages were never authenticated. There is another problem now. Matthew claims this was around 1 a.m., but the neighbors will tell a story of hearing gunshots at 11 p.m. The next problem is that during an interview with investigators, Matthew tells detectives he did not change his clothes or wash his hands. This was potentially a lie. Earlier that night, Matthew is seen on surveillance at a Walmart and is clearly shown to be wearing an outfit different from what he had on later that night. Aside from the outfit, Matthew was never tested for gunshot residue. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation has closed the case, ruling it a suicide, despite the fact that people don't usually commit suicide by firing at their head twice, missing both shots, and then resort to smashing themselves on the head. Jessica is alive, but due to the traumatic head injury, she is not capable of recalling the events leading up to the injury. She is adamant, though, that she would never commit suicide. Matthew afterwards took Jessica's possessions and lied about it in another case between Matthew and Jessica. He was charged with 2 felonies and lost his job as a police officer as a result. The point here is that if Matthew lied about this under oath, what else has he lied about? The work in this case is sloppy and appears as if Matthew was let off the line too easily due to his work as a police officer.
Anything I say can be used against me in a court of law. Do you understand that? I have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with me while I'm being questioned. Do you understand that?
And the fact that the county sheriff so happened to be his granddad. That's right, Matthew's granddad was the sheriff. The same sheriff who lied by pronouncing Jessica dead at the scene. The evidence in this case is so messy that there is clearly foul play involved, and had Matthew been an average Joe, there is no doubt he'd be a prime suspect. A cold case heats up. For 23 years, the murder of Sherry Rasmussen remained a mystery. She was found shot to death in her home, and the police had no leads. They assumed it was a random burglary gone wrong, and the case went cold. But in 2009, new evidence emerged that shocked everyone.
I don't want to talk about this in the squadron because I don't know who people are listening. And if we go to my side, everybody's always wondering what everybody else is doing. Okay.
The killer was not a stranger, but someone who knew Sherry very well. Someone who had a motive, a weapon, and a secret. Someone who was one of the police force's best detectives. Her name was Stephanie Lazarus. A trap is set. The detectives who reopened the case had a hunch that Stephanie was involved. They discovered that she had dated Sherry's husband, John Rutten, before he married Sherry. They also found out that Stephanie had access to the same type of gun that was used in the murder. But they needed more proof. They needed Stephanie's DNA. So they devised a plan to lure her into an interrogation room without arousing her suspicion.
I don't want to talk about this in the squadron because I don't know who people are listening. And if we go to my side, everybody's always wondering what everybody else is doing. Okay.
They pretended that they needed her help with a theft case and asked her to come in for a chat. They told her that they wanted to talk to her in private, away from the prying eyes and ears of their colleagues. They said that the interrogation room was the safest place to do so. They lied. A confession is made. As soon as Stephanie entered the room, they started asking her about John Rutten. They acted casual, friendly, and curious. They wanted to see how she would react. Stephanie was nervous. She tried to act cool, but she couldn't hide her anxiety. She fidgeted, stuttered, and avoided eye contact. She asked what this was all about. They told her it was about his wife. Stephanie's face changed. She knew they were onto her. She knew they had found something. They asked her for a DNA sample. She hesitated, then agreed. She hoped it would clear her name. It didn't. 5 minutes later, they arrested her for murder. A verdict is reached. After months of trial, the jury reached a decision. They found Stephanie Lazarus guilty of first-degree murder. They sentenced her to 27 years in prison. She had hidden her crime for 23 years, but she couldn't hide it any longer. The truth had finally caught up with her. She had killed Sherry Rasmussen, and now she had to pay for it. And that's that for today's video, folks. We hope you enjoy this video. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. Also, don't forget to comment below and let us know which things impressed you the most. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.